Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this planning committee on the 1st of December 2020. I am David Pope. I'm the committee manager for this committee. The reason that I'm starting this meeting is the first item will be election of chair once we have done the register of all those in attendance at the meeting, which I would ask the committee administrator to undertake now.
Thank you, David. Good evening all. If members and officers could give a verbal indication that they are present when called, starting with Councillor Adams, please.
Here.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Here.
Thank you, Councillor Deering.
Here.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Here.
Councillor Morton.
Here.
Councillor O'Hara.
Here.
Councillor Rowley.
Here.
Councillor Fairland.
Here.
And Councillor Titcombe.
Here.
Thank you. And from the officers, we have James Wilson, the Interim Head of Development Services.
Present.
Sean Bennett, the Senior Development Officer.
Here.
Peter Chaplin, the Development Services Manager.
Here.
And Emma Granger, the Senior Planning Lawyer.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Callum. Just to let everybody know that this is a virtual committee meeting. We will introduce everybody by name during proceedings. The order of proceedings is as follows. There will be an officer update in relation to a planning item if there is one. The officer will then present their report. Public speakers will be taken in the order present on the speakers list. We have 2 speakers for tonight, both virtual, and they will be brought into the meeting for their speech. The members then undertake the debate on an item. The chair, once elected, will restate the recommendation to be voted on. Seconder and proposer for each recommendation will be sought and obtained, and then Callum will undertake a vote asking each member by name how they intend to vote on the item, and the chair will then state the decision that has been reached as a result of that vote. So let's start with the election of chair. Can I seek a nomination for the position of chair for the remainder of the municipal year? Councillor Thurland.
Yes, David, I'd like to nominate Mark Rowley as chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for that proposal?
I'll second that.
That's Councillor Titcombe seconding that. Can I see a show of hands, virtual or otherwise? All those in favour of Councillor Rowley as elected as chair? Anyone against? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? It looks like that's unanimous. Councillor Rowley, would you like to take the chair? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. First of all, can I thank Ash for standing in as chair for the last, 9 months, and also Councillor Stanton for the many years she has been the chair of planning, done a sterling job and really helped us all along, I think. So next item is the appointment of deputy chair. Do I have any nominations?
Yes, can I nominate Scott Edwards as deputy chair, please?
Okay. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Linda was first.
Right.
All those in favour? Show of hands.
Yeah, I think we're unanimous
Yeah,
there, Chair.
unanimous. Well done, Scott.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Howells, with Councillor Deering acting as a substitute for tonight.
Thank you. And declarations of interest. Shakes of heads. No. Okay. So next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of October. Is everyone happy they're a true record?
No, Chair,
Yeah.
can I add, it was discussed on the night that my name was on one of the applications in error. This was agreed on the night, and I also asked for it to be noted in the minutes, along with the fact that no letter of objection had been received into the file for myself. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. I think as Callum's agreed to put that in already, hasn't he? Yeah. Okay. With that amendment, is everyone happy? I try and sign them as a true record.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Any items of business considered urgent? I don't have any. So onto the planning application reports. We've got 2 with a speaker on each one. Jack Appleton for item 6.1 and Councillor Sedwin Brown, who's speaking as a third party on
Both of those are in the
6.2.
waiting room, Chair.
Sorry?
Both are in the waiting room.
Excellent. So if we start with 6.1, the KET 2020-0035 Hill Street, Kettering. Is that Sean?
No, it's me.
Peter.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, David. We'll go to the slides, please.
So there's no update, is there, Peter?
There's no update, no.
Bear with me, the screen share's having one of those days today. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Excellent.
So, thank you, David. The site is the one edged red on that plan there. And points to note about that is the relationship between the existing property roundabout on the eastern side is Carlton Street, Terrace Housing, Hill Street is at the top of the site. The site sort of slopes unevenly from northeast to southwest, and the area the southwest is adjacent to Slade Brook and Northfield Avenue. The other point to note on that plan is the relationship between properties at the south side, and I'll come on to that shortly in terms of the end of railway terrace, railway view. Next slide, please, David. Yeah, so this plan here shows an area in blue at the top, which is an area which has got extant planning consent for eight townhouses, and that adjoins the existing site proposed for these additional 12 houses. Next slide, please. So this is the layout plan, and it shows the relationship between the proposed 12 houses, the consented plots 1 to 8 on the north of the site, to the north of the site. And you'll see also at the area at the bottom, it's annotated allotments. There are some allotments which have got some use, but these are not affected by the existing land use. Sorry, these are not affected by the proposed land use, although some of the land which has rights of way has been the subject of objection because it goes over the application site. Next slide, please. So here are the slides of the proposed houses, and they're generally what we call 2.5 story, with the exception of plot 9, which is the plot which is closest to Carlton Street. Next slide, please. These are layouts of the floor plans, and you'll see in the report that these room sizes have all been tested for compatibility with space standards. Next slide, please. So again, this is a section of the plans for the plots that are proposed to go on the site. Next slide, please. And again, there's floor plans for those. Next slide, please. And ditto, some more plans for some of the plots. Next slide, please, David. And again, I'll come back to that. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial view taken from Google to show the site, and you'll be aware that it's currently an open spaced area, although largely overgrown and in an unkempt state. Some of the issues that have arisen through consideration of this application include the impact of the loss of habitat on wildlife, and that's dealt with in the report. Next slide, please. This is from the top of Hill Street. Now, this view doesn't include the current application site. This is more relating to the land to the north, but you'll see if you look down that from that view there towards the south of the site, south of the land that slopes away, as I said, to the southwest. But within that site is the current application site. Next slide, please. This is a street view of Hill Street to give you an idea of the context, and it's a consideration that some of the comments that have been made by third parties relate to manoeuvrability down the means of access. Next slide, please. So this is a photograph taken through the railings at the top end of the land from Hill Street. Again, this is not immediately the site of the site, but you will see the land is largely in an unkempt state and overgrown. Next slide, please. So this is further down the site and roughly equating to the area of site in question, and you'll see the houses in the background are those on the Carlton Street, which are the terraced houses, and they're at a higher level. So the relationship between those and the application site takes account of the fact that the ones on the application site will be at a lower land level. Next slide, please. Now this is taken from the corner of Northfield Avenue. Again, it doesn't show, you can't see exactly the site from this angle, but the houses on the right hand side are those of Railway View, and the next slides will show you the relationship to the Railway View, the end of Railway View to the site. So if we take the next slide, please. So this is Railway View, and again, these houses aren't affected by the current proposal at all. And then at the end, the next slide, please. There's a track which is access to the allotments on the south side. There have been objections from some of the allotment holders that the land that they have some rights of access over includes the application site, but that is a private matter for them to resolve with the landowner. And then the final slide, I think, yeah, this is a plan which was sent in by one of the allotment holders, and it was intended to show this private rights of way matter. I won't dwell on this, but just suffice to say that the land edge raid is not affected by any existing allotments that are shown on the site at the moment. So that I'll go back, David, to the layout plan, if I may. Yeah, that's it. So we have a proposal here for 12 houses, what might be described as townhouses, 2.5 story. The plan there shows the disposition of the layout, and the intention is that the access road from the top of Hill Street would be the means of accessing both the consented piece at the top, which hasn't started obviously from the photographs, and also this land at the bottom if it were to be approved this evening. The road itself would become adopted, but the areas around it, the areas of open space and incidental open space that aren't in gardens would need to be looked after, and that's covered in the conditions on the recommendation. So, as I say, the land edged red sort of is lower down at the Northfield Avenue side, and the issues that we considered was, first of all, the principle. Well, clearly it's in the town boundary, and in keeping with sustainable development, it's in a sustainable location because of that. Consideration was given to the fact that it was in background studies, it had been identified as open space. But as the evidence shows, that over a number of years, this part of the site hasn't actually been very well used for allotments themselves. So that's more to the land to the south. So in terms of the emerging Part 2 plan, the weighting exercise was in relation to whether or not we could warrant an objection on the grounds that this was looked at as an open space area within the town, and concluded that because of the apparent lack of demand for the use of the site, and again it's private land, we wouldn't be able to sustain an objection to the site being developed because it had been open space previously. So the report then turns to other issues of relationship of the site to the neighbouring properties, and that's detailed in the committee report for you. The numbers, the distances between dwellings, they're all identified within the report, and the disposition of the houses is considered to be acceptable in relation to neighbouring properties. As I say, because of the slope, the nature of the sloping ground, the levels would be conditioned through later information, but we're assured that the site can be developed in the way it's shown on that plan. There are some other comments relating to drainage, and that's all, again, it's detailed very fully in the report and subject to flood risk assessment, and that's providing certain measures are put into place that's considered to be acceptable. There were some concerns raised during consultations about the overlooking of the car park areas and whether it would be considered to be good surveillance, but there are windows from the proposed properties onto the car parking areas, and it's considered that there's a reasonable amount of surveillance to make them practical and safe use. The matters of ecology were dealt with, and clearly at the moment it's probably a haven for wildlife because of the nature of its brambles rather. But again, with some careful management of the site, those issues can be addressed, and you'll see in the report and recommendation in particular that the lighting in terms of animals moving along close to the wildlife corridor along Slade Brook is dealt with appropriately. I think I'll leave it there because most of the comments have been covered in the report. The highways are satisfied with the layout for the road. There is parking on site for each property, as shown on the drawing. So I'll leave it there, and if there's any further questions, I'll try to answer those for you.
Thank you, Peter. Can we bring in our speaker, Mr. Appleton?
We can just close this down, Chair, one sec. I'm just waiting for him to connect his audio, Chair. There should be a button, Mr. Appleton, if you can hear us, that says, how would you like to join audio? Use computer. There we go. You just need to unmute now.
There you go. You can hear me?
Hey, excellent. Right, so we've reached the stage of proceedings. We've got 3 minutes to address the committee, Mr. Appleton. So whenever you're ready, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank officers, and in particular Peter Chaplin and Teresa Nicol, for their time and effort and working with the applicant to get to the position with an application that is recommended for approval this evening. I would like to highlight that the applicant has worked in good faith with the officers and consultees throughout the determination period to resolve all issues and concerns as they arose. This has ensured that the scheme presented this evening accords with all local and national planning policy, has no technical objections to the granting of planning permission. The key changes made during the application process included amendments to the layout for the houses and access route fit outside the identified flood zones, and changes to the access road to ensure it accords with adoptable standards and ensures highway safety. It is noted that the committee report incorrectly states that the proposal would not include sustainable drainage or SUDs. The submitted drainage strategy highlights that the surface water will ultimately drain to the Slade Brook, but this will be controlled outflow by a controlled outflow in line with required runoff rates. In any case, condition 18 requires final drainage details to be submitted before any above ground works. As identified in the committee report, the principle of providing residential development on the application site is acceptable. The site is set within an established residential area within the town boundaries and comprises a vacant site not been used for a considerable period, even for access given its overgrown state. The proposals would therefore improve the appearance of the site and bring it back into active use. The site is sustainably located within walking distance of services and amenities in Kettering Town Centre and is accessible by public transport. Therefore, the provision of 12 low-cost family-sized dwellings should be welcomed on this site. The proposed houses would be accessed from Hill Street via the site to the north, which already benefits from planning permission for 8 houses. All proposed houses exceed national space standards and will provide a high-quality living accommodation for new residents. The proposed development will fit in with the residential character of the area, which is made up of high-density housing. The proposed layout is considered to make efficient use of the land, which is in accordance with the NPPF. Proposals would ensure residential amenity of adjacent residents is protected, and the layout and positioning of windows ensures a high level of natural surveillance throughout the site. Each of the dwellings would have a private garden and allocated resident and visitor parking in accordance with adopted standards. In conclusion, given the proposals don't give rise to any technical concerns, the delivery of new housing on this vacant site in a sustainable location should be looked upon favourably, and it is therefore requested that members approve the application for them this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Appleton. I'll pop you back in the waiting room. The meeting will continue on YouTube for you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Thurland.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite unnerving how many applications have already been approved over the 15 years or so on the related parcel of land, and that's still not been built out. But we've had conditions varied, and we've got 24 conditions, which I think is probably the total we've ever had in an application. What's the relevance to the already approved application noted on 8 and 9? Because it goes into quite detail that they are linked. I know we look at each one individually, but it just says there will be a reduced side access or amenity on one of the plots on the previous application to allow this site to go ahead. And that's being covered by an S73 application under application number 2020-85, but I don't know what an S73 is, and I can't see number 85 in the planning history. And then we're talking about highways, and that highways have got a concern about the private drive of number 14 and the number of visitor parking spaces. And it says there's been a prior response, but I'm not sure what that one is. And we're talking about, if these two sites come to fruition, we've got 20 dwellings coming out onto Hill Street. And I know on page 23, it says, refers to the local area as reasonably narrow. Now, Hill Street and Carlton Street must have been some of the two narrowest roads in Kettering, so I don't think it's reasonably narrow. They are very narrow. And that Hill Street, when they're coming around Hill Street, you've got Carlton Street and that, and they're all going to go out onto the road that links up to Sainsbury's, or that's, you know, something like 40 cars going out. And it was talking about alleviating the problem of the traffic management system when we're going to build. I don't think anything is going to alleviate the problem, because that turning circle that shows the red car there, that's going to be the entrance. Well, when I walked past there a couple of weeks ago, there were 3 cars parked in that turning circle, so they're going to have to park somewhere else. So I think it's going to exacerbate the parking problems, not alleviate it. Whatever the construction management plan is, it's not going to be easy. Page 13 notes a number of points are made about the ecology of the area. And huge swathes of natural habitat is going to go if both of these sites come to fruition. And we're talking about the allotments. Well, surely, wouldn't we be better to try and make that land, I know it's privately owned, but into allotments? Or I don't know if anybody's tried over the years, but I think that might be a good way of keeping that piece of land. There's also on page 13 and 15, we're talking about the flooding, and Anglia Water says the developer is still not looking to connect surface water into Anglia Water's network. And they're talking about it going into Slade Brook. But Slade Brook floods, and I'm not so sure that having all this surface water is going to, because the more housing is going to be less surface for the water to dissipate. And it also says that they've had comments on PLN 0078143, which I don't know whether they're saying it doesn't matter if it goes into Slade Brook or not. So I think Slade Brook is a real bad area. Page 14 as well says that primary and secondary education would be adversely affected by this, by the proposal. And page 16, the clinical commissioning group also confirms there would not be sufficient capacity, and they're all asking for money towards these things. But on page 18, we're saying there's no 106 monies because there's only 12 dwellings. But if this is related to the previous one, which has got 8 dwellings, that's 20 in total, do we know if we got 106 monies for the 8 dwellings to alleviate some of these problems or not? And it says on page 20, it says we're using the broadest principles of the local planning policy 35 and policies 11 and 29 to develop this site. I think the broadest principles could be a good phrase for that. Finally, Chair, page 22 actually acknowledges that plot 9 would potentially have a detrimental impact on Carlton Street, but this is not a consideration as it doesn't create a relationship that is out of character in this densely populated area. But these houses were built in Victorian times, before we had rules and regulations, and certainly before we realised that the environment that people are brought up in and they live in plays such an important part in their lifestyle. So we should be looking to improve the area, not use it as an excuse that we build more and more houses in these areas. Yes, development should be in keeping with surroundings, but not at the detriment of people's lives. And it says Chapter 12 of the NPPF advises good planners should contribute positively to making places better for people. And I'm sorry, I don't think this does. Thank you, Chair.
You want to comment, Peter? You're on mute.
I'll come back on some if I can get them, those points. So first and foremost, the site to the north was subject to what we call Section 73 application. That means that the consent was granted. There were some changes, and one of the notable changes was to make the access road suitable from a highway point of view. So Highways Authority confirmed that access that I mentioned to you would be suitable for both the land to the north and this particular site as well. in terms of are they related? No, they're not. They're two separate applications. And whilst the numbers of houses was 8 on the first one, and this is 12, and together they would add up to more than 10. It doesn't, because we can't relate the two applications together. We can't require Section 106. We didn't require Section 106 on the first application. In regard to the second application, what the planning practice guidance says is anything under 10 is you shouldn't be asking for 106. The actual policy in the joint core strategy doesn't set an exact number of houses where the Section 106 contributions would kick in, and it's our view that it wouldn't be reasonable for 2 extra dwellings to require the level of Section 106 contributions that were asked for by essentially by the health authority and the education authority. And clearly they will point out some of these issues time and time again, but there has to be a reasonable balance made on applying for Section 106, and where it's only 2 houses above what is a practice note, it's not even a policy, it's not considered defensible that we could ask for Section 106 in this regard. In terms of allotments, as I explained in the presentation, the allotments, there are some allotments off the site outside the land edge dread which have had some use, but generally speaking the land over a number of years hasn't been taken up for allotment use, and it's because it's a private site, you can't force people to turn it into allotments even if you thought that was desirable. And as I said before, in terms of the local plan requirement, it wouldn't be a sustainable reason to refuse it because the land's not being used for allotments, if you will. The flooding issue, there was, as I said, there was a flood risk assessment undertaken, and in addition to that, the lead local flood authority was satisfied that the site could be adequately and properly drained, and that's dealt with in the report. In terms of the relationship between existing and proposed dwellings, yes, there is the development roundabout is small terraced streets, but in terms of access to the highway, there's no restriction on vehicles going up those streets and accessing this site. And at the end of Hill Street, where the cars are currently parked, clearly they would not be able to stay there if this site got developed. But within the site itself, there is adequate parking for the proposed development. And perhaps finally, in terms of feedback, the construction management plan would deal with some of those issues that some of the neighbours, and to be fair, there weren't that many objections to the application from the local residents. There was, I think, 3 comments from the allotment holders and 1 or 2 from others around living on those adjoining streets, but they were more to do with making sure that the construction arrangements were dealt with in a sympathetic and adequate way, and we're assured and convinced that we can control that through a construction management plan.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you. Real concern really with development of this area because traditionally and historically that area has flooded. A high water table, already been said, you put more properties on that land, increasing the water table even further. We're supposed to be trying to future-proof this, Kettering, and we're not. These properties here, they're going to surface water into Slade, which feeds into the river. fish in that river, and people live healthier lives with living a house and pollute our rivers. My biggest concern, it seems very contradictory throughout the report.
Sorry, Councillor. I don't know about anybody else, but it's hard to hear you. Can you make sure you're facing the mic?
Sorry. I'm just concerned that this development is not really taking into account the fact that it's built right along next to the brook, which has historically flooded in the past, and the development doesn't seem to be taken into that. There doesn't seem to be the plans there to show how we're going to deal with the flood from it and the surface water drainage. I know Peter's just said there's a plan being put in place, but it seems to be as a condition. The access to the site isn't great either. So I'm quite concerned that with the rising water table, and you can't exactly put an attenuation pond in here because there isn't the space. It's the lack of access and it's the lack of availability for the NHS to take anybody else on. The doctor's surgery can't take anybody else on. We're not going to get any 106 monies. That's going to make it even harder. Again, with the schools, we've got problems with second schooling. We need to kind of look at it from a more holistic point of view and look at the way that putting these properties in going to affect the surrounding area. It's a busy main road that's going to be coming out onto North Avenue. Is dreadfully busy. What I wanted to ask is that if that went ahead, the combination of the 12 houses and the 8 that are already going in, they're 2.5 high, which makes them really quite high. So where would they come up to on the existing housing? It says there's Velux windows in the top, so there isn't looking because the window and also they're going to be put higher, so they're going to be above head height. Nonetheless, there are a lot of houses going back to back on terraced houses. We're away from that. We're trying to keep all open spaces. Living in a country, and that is not going to go away anytime soon. So we need to be building houses that are more future-proof, more eco-friendly, and we shouldn't be building in what is essentially a floodplain. Thanks, Chair.
I'll just come back on a couple of those points. Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's important to say that it's when you're making a decision on a planning application, you have to look at the evidence for the particular application itself. In this case, we've had a flood risk assessment done. We've had assurance that they can deal with the issue of the drainage. I think historically some of the problems at Slade Brook have been down to the maintenance of the Slade Brook itself, rather than necessarily the sites around it. But that aside, the site has been looked at by the relevant statutory bodies, including Highways. Highways are satisfied that the site can be accessed in the way it's shown. As I said earlier, the construction management plan would deal with some of the technical issues about when vehicles go there to construct houses and so forth. And the nature of the sloping land gives us opportunity to control levels relevant to other properties around it, and the ones that are perhaps the most affected are on higher ground in any event. So although it's an urban scheme, it is in character with that nature of that area, and considered to be a suitable site for this development.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back about the flooding, and I know it says that the risk assessment has been done, but we had the problem when the flats were built on the corner. The river, lake, stream, whatever you want to call it, rose completely, and in fact flooded Northfield Avenue, and even to the extreme of going into the shops over the road. And we're talking, a year, 18 months ago when this happened. I can only see that adding more houses into an area which is supposedly saturating water at the moment is going to add more water into the river and going to create more of a high rise. Now, I know you say some of it is down to that it's not being preserved properly and perhaps it's not being cleaned or sludged or whatever they call it, but I'm pretty sure it's not just down to that. And I think actually they accepted when the flats were built that that was part of the problem, certainly on the corner of Northfield Avenue. And the second thing is the section 106. Now, I know you say that 10 is the number and this is 12. Well, it's still over 10. And, you know, at some point you have to go over to a number. And if the recommended number is 10, then if it's more than 10, then we should be asking for section 106. You're right, you know, Eskdale Medical Centre, and that's, you know, the doctor surgery that I belong to, it's crammed. You know, it's not going to be able to accept any more people into there. And then the local primary schools up there, St Andrews, isn't it, just at the top there, again, absolutely chocker. So, you know, they need this money to be able to extend their doctor's surgeries, their schools, and, you know, they are both important things to the health and well-being of people. And yeah, the flooding. So I'm really kind of against this application.
I'll come back on the point about those two things. First of all, the section 106, to make it really clear, the joint cause strategy does not set the number 10 as the trigger for asking for 106. It is in the lower case text, if you like. The 10 is a sort of a rule of thumb, but it's not a policy figure for asking for 106. And the judgment here is about, is it reasonable to ask for 106 for when you've got two more houses above what is a notional number, and in policy terms, the officer advises that it is not a reasonable thing to ask for. In terms of the issue of the flooding, yeah, we understand that the issues of flooding are important to deal with, but the proposal is subject to a suitable flood drainage arrangements, and that has been looked at by our consultees and concluded that that can be done satisfactorily. It's no different from lots of other sites where they have to arrange for the site to be properly drained. It happens all the time, and this is a detail which would be conditioned through this development.
Got Councillor Titcombe next.
Thank you, Chair. I must be the strange one out here because I'm in favour of this, but I do have some concerns, one which Councillor Thurland raised, and that's increased traffic there, which, as Kettering has a lot of, early 20th century and late Victorian roads which were built for horse and cart and not vehicles, powered vehicles, that is, horseless carriage, I believe they called them. So I understand the road down Hill Street, Josh, needs a bit of TLC, but the increased traffic, I don't know how we can deal with that other than stop the whole thing. So, and I don't think that's practical. One good saving, there's no access for vehicles from Northfield Avenue, just a footbridge. That ground has been vacant for a long, long time. Times I walked along there, and as we're talking of that, walking and not driving along there, if you do tend to walk along there, you will see a lot of drain grills coming off the roads. Up there, Meadow Road is a classic example, and also opposite Asda store with grills coming off from wherever into the Slade River. I used to call that a brook when I was a lad, brook jumping, but them days are gone, obviously. Work has been done along that, along the Slade to widen it out a bit. Not too long ago, one of the banks collapsed because of the force of water, but that was from further up the river, which caused a massive influx of water. And it seems like these days we're getting more and more rainfall from the sky. I do remember the flood down at Lower Street, but that was bad drainage, didn't help it either down there. which most of the bunged up drainage came from the buildings down there, by all accounts, running off the road and filling the drains up. Doesn't help. So, but yes, I think they're on top of that, and I believe the floodplain is further along the road at the bottom of Meadow Road. And it also seems to be on our cricket ground as well sometimes. But we are almost dealt with that. We're doing our own drainage, since nobody has a proper answer. But as far as it goes, there's no danger of overlooking as such, other than the terrace houses from Carlton Street, out their rear windows, will be looking on top of the houses, you know, the roofs. It is a very steep slope there. I presume they've got to cut back a bit for building, so, and it does sort of fit in with housing further along. Other than that, you know, my concerns are the traffic, but we're going to have that whatever we do anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Adams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think this is another one of those applications. It's another example of something that, you know, we're not happy with. There's lots of things going on there. It's a very crowded area already. We've got the traffic that has already been said by another colleague. You know, it's not what Kettering was designed for in the first place. And I have empathy with all of that stuff. We're in a new way of living, have been since sort of March time. And looks like we're going to be moving into at least the beginning of next year as well, with the coronavirus and COVID, which has made us all very aware, more aware probably than we've been in the past of our living conditions. But I have to say on this, we have the reports from the experts, which, you know, I certainly am never going to put my head on the line and say that I know better than any experts. And unfortunately, I think our planning laws and our planning policies and everything that we make our judgments on, and rightly so, are behind where our mindsets are, because of how because of what we've encountered this year. So I can see nothing that would in any way allow anybody to defend a decision if we decided to reject this planning application. I really can't find any sound planning reasons to do that. But like I say, I think one of the things we're struggling with this year is that we know what we'd like to see, and we'd like to see it yesterday. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, because our legislation is always that much further behind.
Thank you, Linda. Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of things that come to mind. It says the NHS, as the clinical commissioning group, can confirm there will not be sufficient capacity in the local primary healthcare system to absorb the anticipated increase in demand. Well, you either have or you haven't. I mean, we're actually being told now with COVID that because of the pressure on the NHS, we've all got to stop this happening and stop if somebody needed urgent surgery. So I'm worried about that statement from them. I just need clarity on a point as well, because we're humming and ahhing about 12 when they say it's 10 that should have the section 106. But isn't there 20 on this site? I mean, if I was a developer, do I just keep submitting plots of 8? Does that mean if I've got 50 houses and I keep submitting plots of 8, I would never have to pay a section 106? I'm trying to understand how that works, because it looks like the whole area there is being developed. You know, there is planning permission outstanding for that other area, so it gives a total of 20 houses. You know, to say we're not, you know, it's over 10. It's a bit like saying, okay, well, it could be 11. Well, it's 1 over, we won't give it. Or it could be 9. If it's over 10 and that's what it is, we want it. If they can't agree it, well, they can't build there. And as for the looking at the flood map from the Environment Agency, it looks like that is in between. It's almost the bottom corner going towards the island that's realistically more of the flood issue, according to the Environment Agency planning website. So it doesn't look like it's too bad there, because it's more near the island, if that's what I'm reading is correct, which is what we use at when I'm working, actually looking at flood zones. But there still is a slight potential there. But overall, you know, if we can't accept 106 agreements when it's been asked for, because the additional thing, and like you say, the sheer amount of people in that area, my wife goes and has her nails done in one of the houses up there, and she says she can never find anywhere to park. It's always a nightmare trying to get out. And we're saying put more houses there. And you say there's nothing to object, but I thought the Northamptonshire Spatial Strategy says that it should be a sustainable community development. Well, is it really sustainable if we're putting it in a position where it actually, there's not enough space for, there's not enough houses, there's not enough room for them? Thank you.
Okay, James, did you want to come on that?
Point?
Sorry, Peter. Should I just quickly say my piece and
Yeah,
then I can feed back to you? I think just commenting on the Section 106, government did, and I can't remember when they did this, but they did issue a sort of ministerial edict in relation to 10 dwellings for affordable housing, because clearly they wanted the building industry to carry on in relation to kind of COVID, etc. So there is this sort of nominal target below which you shouldn't really apply Section 106. I mean, what we don't want to see is developers coming in and putting in applications just below the kind of limit where Section 106 does actually get triggered, and then put in further applications, you know, so that actually we never get any Section 106, as Councillor Morton was saying. And I think depending on, and I'll have to get Emma to maybe correct me on this, but in relation to how those applications are sequenced, maybe if there's if one was consented however many years ago by a different landowner or developer, and then another one comes in, then maybe it's reasonable to say that we can't request further contributions. But you know, in general, I think we would be looking unfavorably on the fact that, you know, these dwellings over 10, you know, if that's what's happening, aren't going towards a contribution to Section 106, because, you know, that is kind of almost going around the regulations to try to get development on the cheap, as it were. Emma, do you have a comment on that at all, legal wise?
Yeah.
These two applications are completely separate. The first one was 4 years ago, and it was relating to a different set of proposals. This current proposal was coming much later, and it's not a related, although it's in the same ownership and control of the landowner. It's not a related. It's not another application to extend on top of the first one, if you will. So,
but the first one hasn't been developed out.
No, it hasn't, and but nonetheless, that, you know, the view we've taken is that these aren't related. These two applications can't be related, and there was no attempt to persuade us that they're doing it in a piecemeal way like this. I think the thing about the flooding, Councillor Morton was right about that. The main area is on the corner of the roundabout on Millfield Avenue, but as the layout plan shows, the line of building is outside the line of the floodplain. And then finally, the comment from the clinical commissioning group is a general plea for more money, but again, it has to be related to what's reasonable to ask for in a particular application, and for the reasons I've explained, we consider that it's not reasonable in this instance.
Did you want to come back, Emma?
Yeah, it was just really about that adjoining sites and the threshold for Section 106 agreements. Usually, if it was seen as a whole site, as in an allocated site, or applications that were put in at the same time, then we might, depending on exactly how our local plan policies are drafted, we might be able to combine them. But the way that this has been done, sort of several years afterwards, it would be very difficult for us to argue that that was the same site. So for Section 106 purposes, we would have to take them in terms of thresholds as two different sites. There has been some case law on it, but I don't think it would support us trying to look at them as one site.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Thurland, can we have something new?
Yeah, well, I just want some clarification because Peter's just said, and I was going to ask the question, both of these pieces are in same ownership, these pieces of land. Now, the application that was put in 2017, three years ago, also had a variation in 2018 and another variation in 2020. So these are live. These are live. This is a live application that keeps asking for variations, and there's got to be a variation on that because of the road access to this new piece. So are we saying that because we're changing that new piece, the approval given for the older piece, the top bit, can't stand because we're now changing it? The other thing as well is, where does Anglian Water say that they're happy with all this surface water going into Slade Brook? And what about the effect on the ecology into the brook from all these houses in this surface water, from changing oil on cars to washing cars? It's all going into the Slade Brook. And yes, while it floods at the far end, but the flow of water is still going to increase that flooding because all this water is coming down. And the 106, I can't believe that because it's too over, we're crying out for infrastructure in our town, and that is one way of getting the money that's going to help the lives of all the other people that live there by us accepting all this development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I'll try and make it a bit different for you, Chair, because I know that we're all batting on the same thing here. First of all, I can say probably to most people that the person concerned here could easily do a viability study, which would put a stop to all this anyway. The most important thing, and I keep looking through this, is really what Anglian Water is saying on page 15, which I would like some clarification on, because the first paragraph states the planning application still stands, and it's the next one. It's the next one. Is that what's included? So really, where do we stand with Anglian Water on this as a development? And forgive me, but unless they're all social housing, I see nothing mentioning social housing at all. Is there no contribution at all towards social housing on this development, or should there be?
So no, it's not social housing in the sense that it's sort of thought about, but the trigger for social housing or affordable housing is above 10 in the policy. So there was never going to be a requirement to provide for affordable housing, but clearly it's market-led housing, and that would attract a certain sector of the market. In terms of Anglian Water, the comments that we've received are that those issues can be dealt with, and that Anglian Water is one consultee for the whole process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hara, something new, please.
Well, it's just a concern, really. I don't understand what Peter's just said about the affordable housing. He said if it's above 10, then it should be. Well, it is above 10. It's 12. And so we're just calling ourselves all the time. I don't understand that at all. Am I missing something? 106 monies. The two developers. I know the land is owned by the same person, but the two developers connected. Is it the same person that's developing the 8 and the 12? I'm going back to water. Sorry, shouldn't be something new. If that floods and you're putting more water into it from those 12 houses because of water have got assets there, there's no way round. They're already there. So the fact that the developer hasn't wanted to put into them, is that because of the cost? Is it because of viability, like Councillor Chris just said? Why wouldn't you want to put into the water? Why would you want to put surface water into a brook and ecosystem? It just doesn't stop this application. It really doesn't. Thank you.
Did you want to comment, Peter?
Well, I make it really clear, I think, that the issue of flood risk has been assessed. Our consultees have concluded that the site can be drained adequately. We've got the advice from our consultees that this is a development that can be actioned in an appropriate way. And although we may have concerns about the amount of water going down, this is an issue which has been considered carefully, and on the basis of our comments received, we're satisfied as officers that this issue will be dealt with.
Okay. Councillor Titcombe, can we have some other than flooding, please?
Oh, what? Ow, wow, what's happened? Having a problem? I think I'm right. Something different. Right, 106 agreement, not really different, but where everybody seems to be asking for 106 money. I can understand the officer's point. Now, please, everybody, understand if you put a 106 agreement on there, it puts the price of the house up. It doesn't come out of the developer's pocket. I think we're all sensible enough to know that. I'm all in favour of the cheaper house as possible, because I firmly believe that the price of housing these days is kept artificially high. They could build these things a lot quicker. I know that I'm an ex-builder, so the messing about is just designed to keep the price artificially high. And the average poor working guy, or woman, as the case may be, he's got a lifetime of paying a mortgage. You know, I'm glad I'm not starting out anymore on a mortgage, because it would be a frightening thing. Whereas at one time our mortgage people would say it's 1 week wage and that's your mortgage level. But now it's 2 weeks or more and including the wife's money. So, wow. I'm still in favour of this development, I must admit. 106 agreement, I understand the officer's point of view, and I'm in favour of waiving the 106 agreement. I know we need money, but if we put money on these houses, some poor person has got to find the extra money on a mortgage. So let's go ahead with this, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Deering, then Scott Edwards, then we'll go to the recommendation.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief if I can, Chair, and thank you for this. I mean, I'm not objecting to this in many respects. A lot of that I looked at has been answered, and thank you for that. I would like to know, I don't see anything about the conditions that should be placed, because we're going to be looking at construction traffic coming down narrow roads, presumably, past places, past people living. And so I would like to see, if this is going to be passed, that we have some form of conditions on timings of construction traffic, both time and days of the week as well, please. That's it.
Is that already a condition, Peter? the construction plan.
No, it's not in place yet.
I'm not sure if Peter's got Peter. Sorry, is there a condition in relation to the construction management plan?
Yeah, there is. I'm just looking at it for number 16, condition 16. It says the proposed hours of operation, including HGVs and other vehicle delivery, detailed work program, timetable. I mean, one or two of the comments from the residents in the street related to, but when would these vehicles come to the site? Can they be outside of? Can they be doing working hours effectively? And that's stuff that we can control through that construction management plan.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Edwards, did you want to speak? Your hand's gone.
Very quickly, it is 20 houses in all but name. I have a feeling that those houses are going to be built together. And as for the comment about not asking for Section 1 because we need to have the cheapest houses possible, you tell the families in that house where they're going to put their children and what doctor's surgery are they going to go to.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation from the officers is for approval. I haven't heard any.
Yeah, Mark, Chair, can I put an alternative to refuse this against for the overdevelopment, the flooding issues, policy, what should I say was the overdevelopment, I can't see where I put it, policy 35 and policies 11 and 29 of the JCS. I don't think, while you say brought its principles, I don't think this is within the principles of this policy for what it was made out to be. And the ecology and what water is going to be discharged into that Slade Brook. We're going to put Slade Brook along as a water feature further along the road at the bottom of Meadow Park.
Okay, do we have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Edwards? Want to run the vote, Callum?
Thank you, Chair. So if after I've called your name, if you could indicate if you are for or against the motion to refuse the application, or if you wish to abstain from the vote. Starting with Councillor Adams.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
Against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Against the against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Morton. Unmute yourself.
For the amendment.
Or thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
For the amendment, please.
Thank you. Councillor Fairland.
For the amendment.
Thank you. And Councillor Titcombe. That is 4 votes for, Chair, and 4 against.
I'm going to vote against the amendment.
Need to rerun the vote, Callum, but the other way around.
This time, if after I've called your name, if you could indicate if you're for or against the officer's recommendation to approve the development, starting with Councillor Adams.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Fairland.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Titcombe.
For.
Thank you. Once again, Chair is 4 for and 4 against.
Vote for.
Thank you. So that's 5 votes for and 4 against.
So the recommendation for approval is accepted. Okay, on to next item.
Thank you, Chair.
Can you make sure that you're all muted if you're not speaking, please? Thank you.
Okay, this is application KET/2020/0216, item 6.2 on the committee papers at the Yard, Northfield Avenue, Kettering. There are no updates. The application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a 5-storey block of 25 flats, including 30 car parking spaces. The 0.13 hectare triangular site consists of a 20-space private car park, former builder's yard, served off Northfield Avenue, close to the railway station, which is just to the south, with residential property to the north and south. Next slide, please. The proposal will use an existing access onto Northfield Avenue with 30 car parking spaces, including 3 for disabled users and 4 for the use of electric vehicles. The site plan on the left also shows the provision of landscaping to the highway edge. The right plan shows the flat roof, which shall not be accessible to occupiers, which will become, the reason for that will become evident later. Next slide, please. The proposal is arranged over 5 floors, including an inset 5th floor. You can see provision of some balconies with the privacy screen applied to the 5th floor facing Cleaver Court to the southeast elevation on the middle plan. External materials give the expansive frontage interest. A recessed element facing the rear of Drill Hall Court dwellings, which are to the northeast, is proposed with a roof garden and green wall, which can be seen on the lower drawing. Next slide, please. Floor plans. The ground floor, which is to the left, will primarily consist of service areas with undercroft parking, bin storage, plant, main access lobby, and a 34 cycle store, and together with 1 flat. Each floor above will have 6 flats, including 6 1-bed and 9 2-bed flats, with 9 of these having balconies, together with some communal balconies and good-sized circulation areas. The flats meet national space standards. The roof garden on top of the ground floor lobby will not be accessible to occupiers. The proposal also includes a lift and 2 separate stairwells either side of the building. Next slide, please. This shows cross-section of the proposal in the context of the surrounding buildings. The upper one shows the rear of Drill Hall Court to the right, which are the dwellings to the northeast, and are approximately 21 metres from the proposal. No habitable rooms, room windows or balconies have been proposed to this facing elevation, and the roof garden and green wall have been proposed on that same elevation. The lower cross-section plan shows Cleaver Court, which is to the southeast of the site. The proposal is 1.5 metres lower than Cleaver Court and approximately 25 metres away. The 5th floor balcony privacy screen I mentioned earlier has been proposed to the proposal's facing elevation. Next slide, please. This artistic impression of the proposal is seen from Northfield Avenue. You can see how it is curved with only 3 elevations, which respects the curving nature of the highway. Next slide, please. An elevated artistic impression of the proposal, and you can see the relationship of it with surrounding buildings. Cleaver Court is to the north, which is to the top of the image, and the Drill Hall Court properties are to the left-hand side of it. Next slide, please. The proposal has thought about secured by design and includes controlled access gates, a secure lobby area, and CCTV surveillance, including within the parking areas. Next slide, please. This is a rear view of the proposal as seen from Drill Hall Court. The roof garden and green wall can be seen together with the undercroft car parking proposed. Next slide, please. Now some photographs. This photograph is taken from outside the site's southeast corner at the access to Cleaver Court. The difference in levels can be seen. The rear elevation of the Drill Hall Court dwellings to the northeast are also visible. Next slide, please. This photograph is taken from a similar location facing the rear elevations of Cleaver Court, which is retirement accommodation and consists of about 25 flats. Next slide, please. Shows the access, the site's existing boundary wall that shall be retained, and the rear elevations again of Drill Hall Court. Next slide, please. The access again with the Cleaver Court in the background. The proposal will sit approximately 1.5 metres lower than that building, as I said. Next slide, please. Taken from the access looking southwards, whilst there is some restricted visibility in this direction, the approaching carriageway is on the opposite side of the road. Next photo, please. Again, taken from the access, looking northwards, you can see the good visibility here. Next slide, please. A closer photograph of the Drill Hall Court dwellings from closer within the site. Next photo, please. And another image of the Cleaver Court dwellings from within the site. And last slide, please. And this is a long view of the site, so you can see a bit more of its context. The key issues of this proposal relate to design, impact on neighbours and future occupiers' amenity, together with highway safety. The design first. The design approach proposed and the modern typology employed is inoffensive in its surrounding context, has a good degree of quality and acknowledges the triangular shape of the site well in an area that has a variety of modern building types. Whilst it is dense and high, such a proposal in this location is considered to sit comfortably. Looking at impacts on neighbours' amenities. The proposal does not include habitable room windows that overlook the closest neighbours at Drill Hall Court, and the 25-metre distance to neighbours at Cleaver Court is sufficient when coupled with the privacy screen to the 5th floor. The proposal has also taken the opportunity to add visual interest to elevations, notably through the provision of the green wall facing Drill Hall Court. Any overshadowing towards Cleaver Court occupiers is overcome because the proposal is located to the north of Cleaver Court and therefore not in the sun's arc. Any overshadowing towards the rear elevations of the Drill Hall Court dwellings is minimal due to separation distances and confined to winter months after 3 p.m. This is shown in a submitted sunlight survey. The proposal, as I said, meets national space standards, has suitable cycle and refuse storage provisions. The proposal shall be expected to contribute to open spaces due to the lack of any significant spaces in the proposal, and will also provide a commuted sum towards affordable housing off-site. The access is existing and the proposed arrangement safe, with no objection from the local highway authority. The provision of the 30 car parking spaces at this sustainable location is considered to be more than enough. Other issues detailed in the report include principal, crime and fire safety aspects, biodiversity, sustainable building implications and drainage. The proposal is acceptable on all these matters. As a result, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the imposition of the conditions laid out in the report and subject to an acceptable section 106 being secured. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Can we bring in our speaker?
Hello, Councillor. You just need to unmute.
There we go.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry, Chair. You've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, David. Good evening, Chair, councillors. I'm here this evening on behalf of my mother-in-law and other residents of Cleaver Court to ask you to refuse permission on this application before you. Cleaver Court residents are 65 years old plus, and they're gravely concerned about the impact of this development will have on them, in particular the flats on the side of their block that will be immediately adjacent to this building. Despite the officer's comment on pages 38 and 39, This development will cause a loss of natural light into those flats, particularly as they already have quite small windows. It's going to cause real overshadowing of their building. It's also going to cause a serious loss of visual amenity. Many residents have commented to me over the recent years of how much they've enjoyed the floral displays provided by the Borough Council leading down to the Northampton Road roundabouts. This view will be completely obliterated. Older people enjoy watching the world go about its business through the window and from the safety of their homes, something else that will be taken away from them if this goes ahead. There'll be a loss of privacy caused by the balconies on the side of the development where people will be able to overlook Cleaver Court and watch the movements of the residents, thereby increasing their security fears of these older citizens who already feel quite vulnerable. There'll be increased traffic movements on an already very busy road, which is used not only for train users to get to the station car parks, but also as a cut through from one side of Kettering to another. It's already quite precarious when exiting Cleaver Court car park now without the additional cars from the development. Lastly, I'd like you to seriously consider the impact on the mental health and well-being of the residents of Cleaver Court, the feeling of being closed in and overwhelmed by this building next to their flats, no real view to look at and poor natural daylight. It will cause depression and make people become withdrawn, which is a major factor in bringing on dementia in older people. As elected representatives of this borough, we have a duty of care to protect our residents, and I ask you to please use your conscience when considering this application before you this evening, as well as your planning knowledge, and please refuse this development. Thank you very much for your time, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. I shall pop you back in the waiting room. It will continue on YouTube. Cheers.
Okay, so Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. And I have to say, Sedwin Brown said it perfectly. I know Cleaver Court extremely well. It is predominantly 65 and over, and actually 50% of them are probably 80 plus. To lose the view in the area that they're having in what will be a concrete jungle looking out onto them, it is not right. That, you know, they've purchased these flats, rented these flats to stay there and have accessible independent living, but to be part of a family that actually live in Cleaver Court. And I do feel that this is going to be ruined because of this. I have to say I agree as well with the road. It's a nightmare of a road to get onto. We have the bottleneck that's caused by the roundabout at the bottom. We've got the bottleneck from the train station, which of course is one way, and it is used as a run to get from the bottom half of Kettering, certainly across to the other towns, to the other side of Kettering. So to have 30, 40 odd cars coming out of an entrance, or granted, they won't all be coming out at the same time, but it is going to be a nightmare traffic-wise. And the vision coming out to turn left, you can't see. You can't see at all. That wall is there, so it's going to impair any sort of vision, and that's going to encourage people to drive out onto the pathway and to stop the pedestrian access. Again, I just think it's a complete overdevelopment of an area. It's too high, it's too dark, and it's not right for the residents of Cleaver Court.
Thank you. Sean, you got any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the loss of the view, whilst I do have sympathy for that, unfortunately, kind of loss of a view, it's generally enshrined within planning that it's not a material planning consideration, whereas harm to outlook, that's another matter. If the members thought there was harm to outlook, that's kind of different from a loss of view. In terms of the loss of light, purely because of its location to the north of Cleaver Court, I don't agree that there would be that loss of natural sunlight. It may experience a very small degree in the winter months at the very ends of the day, but I'm not convinced that would even exist. Loss of privacy, it's considered that the separation distance is enough to 25 metres to ensure that doesn't happen. In terms of traffic, what I will say is that the visibility kind of meets the displays required from the local highways authority, and it is also an existing access that serves a 20 space car park. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thurland.
Thanks, Chair. Sean, can I just ask a couple of questions? It says, can we confirm whether the surveillance of the car park is to be provided, including the undercroft? Because much has been made of the close proximity to the station, so therefore we don't need all the car parking spaces, although highways say we're short of them. That's really important. But this area is blighted by county lines gangs that use our railway system. And I'd rather not see any areas that are conducive to people gathering there easily available to them. And I really don't think we should rely on surveillance from neighbouring residential properties either, especially if this is going to be a new build. This has really got to be put in place, but I can't see where that's actually guaranteed. And it says, page 37 says, the building has a greater scale and massing than the 3-storey building next door, which means it's a bit overpowering. And it says on page 38, it says, due to the prominent location and key approach to the train station, the site is worthy of a striking and somewhat imposing building, especially when it sits comfortably against the existing fabric and development. But I don't think it does. You know, do we want to strike in an imposing building, which you're saying, yes, we do, when perhaps it's next door to a 3-storey building and it's going to have such an impact on Cleaver Court? We talk about the boundaries and close proximity. Well, when you're on a ground floor, yeah, perhaps all these yards might be okay, but when you're on a 3rd, 4th or 5th story, your line of sight is a lot different from when you're actually standing on the ground and trying to look over a fence. And then finally, the notes about the balconies and the roof garden. It says the roof garden is for visual amenity purpose only, but to whom? Because it says it's not going to be accessible. But on page 40, on the last paragraph, it says it will be available for common use. So I'm not sure what that actually means. Does it mean not to the general public, but common use means it's use for common people in the sense of their local? And the lift, from what I could see on the plans online, the lift and the stairs actually go up to this communal garden. So I'm not sure how we're going to police and stop people going up there. And we're talking about the overshadowing, and it says it would result in some overshadowing impacts at relatively gloomy times of the year. But that's exactly when we do need as much sunlight as we possibly can get. We're all, you know, people are saying we're all short of vitamin D, which is promoted by sunlight. And we're even talking about giving it to elderly people to counteract what they're losing in the winter. And the communal balconies on 3 of the floors are certainly going to have an impact and won't comply with policy 8 of the JCS, which says development should not result in an unacceptable impact on their amenities. And also, just finally, our own Environmental Protection Department has requested a testing of the air quality. And I can understand why, because those idling cars that are going to the station, it's a nightmare from about 6:30 in the morning to 9 in the morning. And then again at night, they're all parked on the double yellow lines, all their engines are running. And if we think the top of not Northampton Road, Bowling Green Road is bad for air quality, I'm sure down Northfield Avenue and around the station is just as bad. But the planners have said that we don't need it, but our environmental department is saying we could do with one. Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to come back on any of that, Sean?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's quite a lot to get through there. In terms of surveillance of the undercroft areas, CCTV is proposed in the secure by design statement and plan. That also forms part of a condition. There's been natural surveillance from the drill hall courts, dwellings, and also controlled access to the car park area from the vehicle access and the pedestrian access. In terms of its prominence, I just point out that Cleaver Court is 5 stories, the same as this, and this is actually 1.5 metres lower, so would appear to be lower than that. So the development should be seen in that context. Yes, there are balconies proposed facing Cleaver Court, although I will add that the 5th floor will include a privacy screen. In terms of the 1st floor roof garden, this is aesthetics proposed for the Drill Hall Court residents primarily, to give them more of an interesting view together with the green wall. That area won't be available as a roof garden, and also point out that the roof of the actual building is not a roof garden. It's a roof, and it's not accessible. What else have we got? The overshadowing discussed in the report at 38 relates to the Drill Hall Court properties and not the Cleaver Court. In terms of the air quality, it's my view that it's not considered to be necessary. However, there is a condition, we do have a standard condition that could be applied if members felt it necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask a question? Yeah, I understand the privacy screen for overlooking, but the noise of all those communal balconies, I think, is going to be horrendous during the summer when everybody's got their windows open and they're all going to be overlooking that part of Cleaver Court. And whether it's the overlooking on Cleaver Court or the Drill Hall, it's still this lack of sunshine, I'm concerned. And the surveillance, will that be 24-hour watched or not? Do you know, on the surveillance? And how do we impose that? And the controlled access, who guarantees that those gates are still going to be closed all the time? As you know, is there a plan that somebody's going to be on site to do that? Thank you.
In terms of the surveillance, yeah, we've conditioned the CCTV and the other controlling access arrangements to be in place via condition as to ultimately who would maintain that. That would be part of the maintenance regime associated with the building. We can only kind of control it up to a certain point in terms of installation, but ultimately it will be for the building maintenance to ensure that they are provided going forwards. Yes, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I think we're somewhat overdeveloping this site. I mean, the 5-storey building there, I know it is lower to a degree than another building in proximity, but this is Northfield Avenue we're talking about. And I think that would be kind of an eye-watering height there going along that, because people do actually walk along there, believe it or not. And I think if a top story came off there and we just had a 4-storey building, it'd be more acceptable. And also it would help with the parking, well, in my opinion. So I do believe this is one place where we're doing a bit of overdevelopment here, or allowing overdevelopment. And that's just my complaint. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morton.
I was just looking on the point about Northamptonshire, well, NCC, lead local flood authority, no objection, subject to the imposition of a full details of surface water drainage scheme. Have we had a detail of that? Because it's actually showed as a high area of surface water flooding. I think it's 1 in 30.3 years, according to the Environment Age Act, right in where the entrance is and where the centre is. So has that been looked into, and is there a drainage scheme to prevent that?
Sean?
Thank you. In terms of what's been proposed, we do have submitted a drainage design scheme that has been provided. Because of its size and its location, it's not worthy of flood risk assessment having been to be carried out. But also in terms of if we look at what the site is now, it's a completely hard paved site. So therefore, the drainage design that has been, the broad parameters of it that have been provided in the submission show that it's betterment in that regard, because it will be a more controlled water environment that would deal with the surface water rather than it just running onto the highway.
Okay. Did you consult the local authority map to confirm that? The surface water?
The Environment Agency.
Yeah, sorry, the Environment Agency, UK Environment Agency, surface water flooding. It just shows it right smack there, as if there's a little air. It almost takes up the area of where the car park is.
You have more information than me available, Councillor Morton.
You just go on the local authority, the Environment Agency flood maps, and
we have a drainage design proposed, and that looked at whether.
Okay, just the point for you.
And it said that it's within flood zone 1, the least prone to flooding.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Hara. Councillor O'Hara.
Sorry, you dropped out a second then, Councillor. Well, my colleagues practically covered it. My question was that we can't get to the roof. It's not a garden, but the lift goes all the way to the roof. I do think that the application is overbearing. I think it is overdevelopment. I wanted to ask, why is there nothing in there about affordable housing? It says a drop of 30%. So I don't get that on page 32. Also, there's some concerns from NC. They're saying about not having lights, and there are concerns there. It says no vehicle displays are shown in the submission. Have we got those now? Are they? Because I'm concerned, as other councillors have said, about being able to get it out of the site, never mind get into it. If there are gates on there, is that not going to cause a bigger problem for cars queuing to get in? Because how will the gates open? How will they be controlled? My biggest concern is that if they do put gates on there, they'll just be left open all the time. And then we've got problems with people hanging around, which to me causes a problem for the police. And again, the problem that we've got with county lines, it's well known that, you know, people traverse through there on the trains. But again, it's this bit of the strategic housing. They should provide 30% affordable housing or an equivalent commuted sum, unless otherwise reduced through a viability society being done, please.
Sean.
Thank you. Just to come back on Councillor Morton with regards the flood zone, it is definitely within flood zone 1, so the information provided is accurate. I've just checked the EA website for that. In terms of roof accessibility, the lift doesn't go up to the roof; it just stops at the 5th floor. In terms of the affordable housing provision, it is proposed to, as part of the scheme, a commuted sum for five dwellings. Well, towards the cost of 5 affordable dwellings that would be delivered on this site to be commuted off, which is 10% less agreed in terms of what's in the joint core strategy. The control gates will be automated, so therefore there should not be any waiting time for vehicles accessing the site. But even if there is, there's actually 6 meters distance between the gates which open inwards and the roadway, so it's not considered that that would inconvenience highway safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Deering.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, so I think the final one for me, I don't really have an objection to this. I do feel and sympathise with the people in Cleaver Court. The highways is my issue. I know we said that there is a visibility display there. There is clearly some issue, and I'm reading the report here. Now, the report just literally on page 32 just says that the local highway authority say they require further information with the following observations. So what is the further information they required? And actually, what are they saying? They are the consultee. We can't go against the consultee. So what are they actually saying to us? Because it doesn't tell us in this report. Thank you.
Just to come back on that one, the further information required are those detailed in those bullet points. It's the way they construct their comments, unfortunately. But the information there is accurate. I mean, yeah, it's been summarised to a degree, but that is what they're after.
Okay, I want to come back on this, please, Chair, because if that's what they're after, I'll take a classic example there. No vehicle displays are shown in the submission. So have they now subsequently shown vehicle displays or not?
Yes.
Okay, this is information. I'm not being funny. This is information that I don't know about anyone else, but I require that sort of information to make a decision. But, you know, we haven't seen any of that. I mean, most of the things will say, like the environmental protection, no objection, and that's fine. But that's the sort of information that would be helpful for us to make a decision. That's my comment. If they're happy with it, that's fine. But it would be nice to see that sort of information put into these reports.
Sean, you're on mute if you're talking to us.
Sorry. To help Councillor Deering, I'll direct him to page 42, where each of those bullet points are dealt with in turn. And on that particular matter, I say vehicular displays have been added. These are unchanged from the current safe situation, which offers good visibility in both directions. And also a copy of those displays was part of my presentation as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Adams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is around the information on page 31, where it says the pre-application advice was given in late 2019 for a 6-storey, 28-unit apartment block. That the principle of the proposal was supported, but the applicant was advised to reduce the overall height and mass of the proposed building. So my question is because there's comments further on in that at the top of page 32 that they broadly, in a way that broadly accords with the pre-application advice. How much was it reduced in height and mass? Because there's still 25 flats, so there's only a reduction of 3 flats. So I'm just wondering, how much did they actually follow and reduce the overall height and mass of the original that the officers said that that's what they should do?
Yes, the pre-app, from that it's been reduced by 1 full story, and what is now the 5th floor has also been inset as well. You'll notice, so that kind of helps with its mass reduction, and it's been broken up a little bit in terms of the design. The fenestration has broken it up a bit, and also the green wall has been added as well to the rear, which is helpful. In terms of how they've achieved that with reduction in numbers, there's more 1 beds rather than 2.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thurland, can we be quick because we've only got 15 minutes left?
Yeah, sorry, we're talking about the roof, and I appreciate what you're saying, Sean. It's not a roof garden because it's not on the roof, but it's halfway up the building. But where is the access to that from? Because there must be some access to it for maintenance. And also for the green wall access and maintenance. So if somebody can go up there to maintain it, what's to stop the residents going up there to use it? Thank you.
I don't know this for certain, but there are windows that serve that, and they're kind of the good size windows. So that would be their means of accessing that first floor roof garden.
So they've got to climb out of a window to access this roof. Is that where it shows it on the plans? Can you show that? Where
It's not annotated.
Because I can't believe that we're asking somebody to climb out of a window to maintain a roof garden. And if they can climb out of a window, why can't somebody else? I think from a safety point of view, that surely that can't be right.
Or alternatively, they can climb up via a ladder. It's only up to the it's only on top of the ground floor, so it'd be the same as accessing kind of a garage roof, if you like. Whilst I don't have specific answers to that, I have put a condition on with regards to how that will be maintained, because obviously it's an important benefit associated with this scheme. So so it's good that we do know the details of how that will be maintained, and that's the reason for the condition.
Finally, Councillor Edwards.
Just very quickly, just 2 points, Sean. You said about if there was a problem with the gates, they've got a certain amount where they could go up and wait in front of the gates and it wouldn't cause backlogs on the highway. Does that mean it would cause a backlog on the pavement, though, and would restrict pedestrian walking up and down? And the second point, it's regarding if you're coming out of that exit and turning left, the vision there is horrendous. And I think you actually allude to that within your presentation, that you said it wasn't great because they could always turn right. The problem with that is that people don't always think, do they? And if they want to go left, then they will go left. And I just think that that's open to some sort of accident.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the controlled access, yes, it would. I mean, it would be on the access, so it would kind of cross the informal pathway that crosses that access. Yes, whilst the gate's open, but as they're automated, hopefully it'd be a matter of seconds, or it would be a matter of seconds. In terms of people turning left, the passing traffic would be approaching from on that same side, so the visibility would be northwards, which is the excellent visibility. So actually, if the vehicle was turning left from the access, it'd be perfectly safe.
Okay, thank you. Got no more speakers, so the recommendation from the officers is for approval. Do I have a proposer and a seconder?
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah.
I'll propose it.
And Councillor Mitchell seconding, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, okay, councillors, if I've called your name, if you could indicate if you're for or against the officer's recommendation to approve the application, or if you wish to abstain from the vote, starting with Councillor Adams.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
For.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Furland.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Tickham.
Against.
Thank you. That is 4 votes for, Chair, and 4 against.
Are you guys doing this deliberately for my first?
No, we certainly aren't, Chair.
Welcome to the chair.
I'm going to vote for.
That's 5 votes for, Chair, and 4 against.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, everybody. Hopefully that wasn't too bad for my first chairmanship.